Hello and welcome everyone to our webinar today. I'm deeply honored to present myself before you as a humble representative of AABN. I'm grateful to all of you for having made it to this event, and in keeping with the spirit of the new normal, I'll keep my introduction speech short. The AABN, as you all know, is an umbrella front of entrepreneurs from across the globe. Though it was started primarily to brainstorm and look at growth opportunities for the entrepreneurs, its focus expanded over the years to cover issues of wider relevance. Among the many things that AABN organizes are seminars, awareness programs, and events such as today's speech to keep our fraternity updated and enthused. It is extremely gratifying to note that today's webinar is the 32nd edition, and we are proud that we have in our midst Dr. Jawahar Nesam to deliver the speech. Since March 2020, the digital revolution has changed the way that we work and the way that we network and engage on online events. Webinars are here to stay. Therefore, it is important to understand how to maximize your time online when attending events like these. AABN allows you to replicate the webinar experience and creates opportunities for networking with leading figures from across the country and the industry. At AABN webinars, the word brings in mind an hour-long session where we learn something new. Different people seek different things from any event. While some may attend webinars only to gain knowledge, there is a considerable populace that wants to network as well. We are all aware of the advantages of networking. At AABN, it helps you build and maintain a relationship, giving you access to knowledge and helping to create contacts whom you can reach out to for professional help. Without being generic, we focus on areas which provide some niche networking choices for hosts and attendees. COVID-19 has caused education disruptions and prolonged closures of education institutions all around the world, which affected 90% of the world's student population and led most countries to think about alternative ways of providing education to ensure that learning never stops. Keeping education continuity in mind, most countries rush to online education using online platforms, e-learning, etc., which set off an unplanned and rapid shift in the education sector, opened the door to many opportunities, highlighted existing and new disparities, and gave rise to several challenges. The way forward is to further harness available technologies and the internet in education, and that online education will become an integral component of school education. Today, we have an eminent guest speaker from our alumni, Professor Dr. Jawahar Nesam, to deliberate on the topic, Reinventing Education, the Future Ahead. Given his background, Professor Dr. Jawahar Nesam of 1986 batch civil engineering is more suited to talk about reinventing education, the future ahead. Friends, put your hands together for our guest and let me have the privilege of introducing Dr. Jawahar Nesam to you. Dr. Jawahar's profile reads like a dream. Professor Nesam is currently the Vice Chancellor of JSS Science and Technology University, Mysore, and until recently the Vice Chancellor of Savitha University, Chennai. Has 2 decades of academic experience in North America, Europe, and Asia as well. The government of Malaysia, at the instance of the then Prime Minister, invited him to especially contribute to University Technology Malaysia. Professor Nesam was nominated by the then PWD Minister to advise the construction industry development at Malaysia to formulate the roadmap for implementing asset and facility management initiatives established by the Parliament. At Western Michigan University, he involved in high-level academic assignments and administration as a senator. As the head of construction division, Department of Civil Engineering at University Putra, Malaysia, he initiated first ever master's program in construction engineering and management and spearheaded research activities in the field of construction engineering. His book entitled Empowerment in Construction, The Way Forward for Performance Improvement, and another book entitled In Search of Education, published in the year 2019, has become a masterpiece. Professor Nesam also has won several research grants both in Malaysia and USA. He also chaired in several international conferences held across the several continents across the globe. I'm not going to make you wait longer. We'll let Professor Nesam to take over and regale you with his assured experience and fresh ideas. Before I wind up, let me once again extend a very warm welcome to all and repeat that our AABN's doors are always open to those who might want to strengthen our work with their suggestions. I also wish to place on record our deep commitment to work tirelessly as a team to carry forward our goals in a constructive and a gratifying way. Thank you all, and over to Professor Nesam.
Good morning, everybody. And I would like to thank the organizers of this great event, AABN, Anomaly Alumni Business Network. And I heard that weekly you are organizing such a wonderful colloquium where different walks of knowledge are shared and discussed. And I think that the participants, the members are greatly benefited in this way. And normally Sundays are left for some rest and some personal works away from our regular works from Monday to Saturday. But at least this organization has come out with a kind of opportunity for all of us to share our wonderful thoughts, our gained experience over the past several years. And I think that it is a great activity that it must continue ahead. And I must again thank the organizers for giving me an opportunity to share a couple of my views about education as regards to the contemporary time where we live and the challenges and problems that we face these days and future ahead. So with respect to, I would like to answer certain questions, whether education is yielding its intended objects or not, whether education as a philosophy has been derailed or properly incorporated in our educational delivery process, and what are all the major other ingredients that affect the process of education, and how education has become a vital force, an important key human activity or human function for the past several thousand years since we started a civilization to live as a civilized society. And what would be the future, and where are we heading to, considering the technological breakthroughs that we face and the disruptive technologies that is going to bother us for some time this century. And there is the gap between the machines and humankind is getting reduced, and the disparities among the social segments and the social divisions in the society are increasing, ever increasing. The gaps are becoming wider between the haves and have-nots, and the oppressions and suppressions in many forms are increasing day by day. And the global climatic conditions and environmental conditions are rapidly changing because of the human activity. So considering all those social, environmental, political dimensions, ever changing and to a certain extent is endangering the human existence now, has become a cause of concern. And whether education, what is the role in this situation for education, and how education can be utilized, and how education can be properly handled in such a way that we resolve our problems that we caused ourselves, and how the states, the humankind and societies at large should come together and have confidence and bold enough to address this problem. So this is the gist of my talk today. And I'm much interested in society. I'm much interested in truth. I'm much interested in the human evolution. So for that matter, that everyone is interested in truth. So that means why I'm talking about truth when the topic itself is reinventing education, the future ahead. The truth is something that emerges from experience, the human experience. And human experience creates awareness through a process of perception, and this perception, leads the human thought process to come out with wonderful thoughts. That is the truth. So ultimately, truth means knowledge then. So knowledge is the subject matter of education. When we talk about education, we are making the immature to matured. We are paving the way, we are creating the opportunity, we are creating the platform, and we are creating the ambience and environment for the immature to become matured in all respects, not just one in knowledge, but in skills and in creating the mental ability to resolve the problems that the humankind faces or a particular individual faces. So that means knowledge is the core thing, and knowledge is nothing but the truth. So the basic question is that whether all given human beings are knowledgeable or naturally bound to think or not. If you ask these questions, I have to talk about some little bit about the brains, the brain cells, and how the mind thinks and how the material brains causes the mental brain. So the material brain has about 100 billion neurons. Every human being has approximately 100 billion neurons. And each neuron thinks about at least a couple of trillion times an operations per second. So that means 100 billion neurons. You do the permutation and combination. Exponentially, if you look at that, several trillion times of operations a human brain can do per second. That operation is nothing but the human experience. When I see a tree, when I see some colors, the pleasant moment I have after seeing certain, good pleasant colors, or witnessing some pleasant moments, these are all the experiences. So if you just close your eyes for a few seconds, you stop thinking actually. Even though your subconscious mind is going to think about something else internally, that is the different. But after you sleep overnight for about 8 hours and then wake up in the morning, and suddenly when you open up your eyes, you are looking at the physical world, the objects, the tables, the bed, the screens, the trees. That means once the moment in a second that you open up your mind, all these neurons, the billions of neurons there in your brain is going to be active and reacting to the experience. Whatever you see, your neuron cells are going to just react to it and respond to it. And if it is empathetic or it based on the emotional appeal, the neurons are going to discharge electric charges and chemical charges. These electrical discharges produced by the neurons causes thinking, the thought process. To enable us to think, enable us to reason out, and finally come out with the byproduct that is the thought. That thought is nothing but the knowledge, and that knowledge again resides in individuals. That doesn't become a knowledge unless it is referred to the other world, the objects, in a proper, reasonable way, in a justifiable way. So that is what Hegel says, that knowledge lies in looking at the otherness. So you may think yourself, but what is the validity of your thought process? Your thought process lies in the otherness. That otherness may be the other human being, or other human thoughts, or other existing knowledge, or the other objects that you perceive. So that means the knowledge lies in the otherness. Knowledge is not static, and knowledge is a continual process, and it continues to go ahead. That means it is moving. So that means there is no right knowledge anytime in a given time. In a given time, if you look at that, whether this knowledge is true or false, it is momentarily at that moment. You can say it is right or wrong based on your validity, your scientific validity or the social validity. So the scientific validity and social validity are the two validities that confirm whether your knowledge is right or wrong. But again, you have 100 billion neurons and you have several trillions of operations per second your neurons can operate to enable you to think and come out with the truth. So such is the case, why then the knowledge differs from individual to individual? When somebody is subjective to certain arguments, certain concepts, certain people agree, certain people don't agree, because we all have the same neurons. And if you apply quantum physics, our neurons are connected. Your neuron and my neurons and your subatomic particles that, inside the neuron, there are several subatomic particles there. And these subatomic particles are united and integrated or linked between us. But again, you think differently, I think differently, everyone thinks differently, but there is a standard, a knowledge that has a universal appeal with all social and scientific validity. We agree that as knowledge. If 1 + 1 = 2, it is a universal knowledge. And we all agree with that. Scientifically, we agree. Socially, we agree. So we all agree. But to whom to vote for in a given election time, which party A or party B, we differ. We all don't think alike. That means our perception is different. Our perception is different, and our thought process is different. But again, we have the same neurons, the same amount of neurons. And these neurons enable us to think. But why do we differ from each other? Why do we think differently? And that is the problem. So that means we are subject to, the humankind is subject to reasoning, the process of reasoning. And that reasoning takes several forms, and several formats are there. And where there are two kinds of things, integrate or incorporated into the thought process. One is as I said, that the material science. I think the material brain, which has neurons and neural connectivities and tissues there, and the subatomic particles inside neurons, something called microtubulins. It is a recent invention. The microtubulins, which are again a subatomic particle within the neuron. The neuron itself is a minor atomic particle. And within neuron, there is a subatomic particle called microtubulins. And these microtubulins are the cause of the consciousness. This is the recent invention. So that means these microtubulins inside the neuron have become the quanta, are the basic fundamental element of consciousness. So you have that microtubulins, I have the microtubulins, everyone has the microtubulins. But why Einstein found a relative theory of relativity? When you and me and Einstein all have the same, microtubulins and that consciousness, and why are we differing in our knowledge process and in our thought process? This is the problem that never been solved in the human history so far, right from Socrates period onwards, and from Lord Buddha. Lord Buddha said, pervading the reality, pervading the reality. That means that is the truth. the cost of our thought process lies in pervading the reality. That reality is nothing but the truth. That is what knowledge is about. But this knowledge is distorted. The process of the thought process is distorted and affected and influenced in many multiples of ways. I'm going to talk about how we are affected by the society, how our thought process is affected by the society, by our social institutions, different social institutions, our political institutions, our state, I mean our nation, and the globe at large. So that means there are several institutions physically are there to influence our thought process. I would like to touch upon this later. But now, how we are basically influenced by our material brains, how the mental state is affected by the material brain, I would like to touch upon. Because unless I discuss and justify these two, material brain and physical brain, and with reference to the society and the physical entities like the state, the politics, the social groups and other institutions, I don't think that we can understand education, what education is about. Education is the cornerstone. It is like the nucleus of all evolution. And if I have to define properly what education is about, I have to go and take the laws of science. And so far we have been, I think that there are the four basic forces like electromagnetic forces, gravitational forces, and strong force and weak force. If you look at the gravitational force and electromagnetic force, these are all confined in the classical science up to Einstein. From the Newtons or Galileo to Newton and to Einstein, until Einstein, the classical laws, the classical physics, the laws of physics, we followed. And at that time, we didn't know what quantum was about. And we didn't even know what these microtubules in the neurons. And we didn't know how the Big Bang Theory created the world. And we didn't know what atom was clearly. And we didn't know what subatomic particles. Inside atom, there is electron, proton, neutron. And inside proton and neutron, there are quarks. And subatomic, again, if you subdivide, the fundamental element in proton and neutron is quarks. So we have quarks, electrons as the fundamental basic building blocks of our consciousness of all physical things that we see in this world. You and me, all are built up upon these subatomic particles, basically quarks and electrons, because quarks are composing the neutrons and electrons. That's why I don't say neutrons and electrons. So the nuclear fusion causes all these physical material world. The matter is created because of the nuclear fusion. And now, after evolution, after about 14 billion years, after the Big Bang, we are now as we are now. And we have all physical materials surrounding us, the trees and biological lives. So with all these things, I would like to just address how these things are influencing our consciousness, because consciousness is the basic action that lies there in the universe as well in our brain. And that consciousness is going to tell us and give us the truth. And that truth is the knowledge. And that is distorted by our social structure. That is the latter part I would like to discuss about. That is the reason I just want to talk about the laws of physics first, for us to understand how consciousness is influenced by the basic biological physiological system, and how this is related to education in the later part I would like to touch upon. So if you look at that, basically that consciousness I told you that lies almost in the subatomic particle, in the supplementary element in the neuron, I mean microtubulins. The source of consciousness is not there in one neuron. there are 100 billion neurons. When we see an object, our neurons are just going to instantly, in a fraction of milliseconds, it's going to fire electrical charges and chemical charges. And based on that, we are going to think, and then we are going to come out with our thought process, and that we call it as truth. So in such a way, whether the tubulins are responsible for our thought naturally or not, that is my question. It is not, because it is just another physical. As far as the elements or matters confined to space and time, they cannot do themselves on their own. That is the problem. So even though the microtubulins in the neurons can have become the source of the consciousness, and it has the information, and it can process the information, and it can transfer the information from one tubulin to another, from one neuron to another, we cannot say that that has become the cause of the end product of our thought. Our thought is the end product. I mean, our knowledge is the end product of this thought process. And these are all the physical things that is there. They can process it, just like a computer chip. It can process, but it cannot think on its own. If it does, then all human beings will think alike. There will be no diversity, isn't it? Then everyone can think like Einstein. So that means that these microtubulins in the neurons and the neural network, when we see an object, that is human experience, that is what I call human experience. Whatever we do, even when we see somebody is crying, we also start crying. Why do we cry? If we watch a movie, somebody cries in the movie, we also start to cry. That means that we have an empathetic neuron inside the neurons. We have a kind of neuron called empathetic neuron. Sometimes it is called a mirror neuron. It will mirror and it will react to the external world. So that means the neurons cannot just think without reaction to the external world. That external world is called object. That means the neuron is connected with the object. It cannot think on its own. So that means if somebody cries, we also cry. If somebody is happy and laugh, and we also try to laugh. So that means the idea proposed by Hegel on the knowledge, that I said that the knowledge is moving, is continual, it's a perpetual activity, it is not a constant. That means Hegel said, even before this quantum physics came into existence, Hegel said, yes, it lies in otherness. See how scientific it is. The consciousness lies in otherness. So that means you cannot think that yours is the best and it is the ultimate truth. You cannot think so. It has to be referred to the otherness. And with reference to the otherness, you will see the truth. You see your own self-consciousness in seeing the others, in looking at the others, looking at the other object. And without those experiences, you cannot think. That is why our material brains cannot do anything on our own. And people nowadays call that there is something called an intellectual community. And this community have high genes. Now you would understand by my speech now, this is absolute nonsense. There is no genetically induced intellectuality. Please understand that. This is a nonsense. In the name of this genetically induced intellectuality, some people claim they are from the knowledgeable race, and some communities claim that they are knowledgeable, which is not. That is why I'm explaining all these things. This has a strong, deep-rooted influence in the educational system. That is the reason I have to explain this. You and me know that. Every one of us studied engineering. You know the basic laws of physics. And maybe the advanced modern laws of physics also you know. Everyone knows. But how this is connected to education and the disparities and the discriminations we face in this part of the world in contemporary times. Have we ever asked these questions? Without justifying and validating this science, People just casually come out in the TVs and in newspapers, and even the laws, the policies and the regulations of the country also follow the same, age-old rustic ideals without any science involved. That is why I said that if you have an IQ, a high grasping capacity, naturally, genetically, that is nothing to do with the resultant knowledge that you are going to come out with. That is the science I would like to touch upon. So that means sometimes you see, yes, we have all these things, all these ingredients there, everybody has, but some people foolishly act, some people, intellectually, scientifically react to when they go through some experience. If somebody shouts us, and we also shout at them. And somebody doesn't shout. So the people are reacting in a different ways, in different manners. It depends upon the consciousness that they, come out within themselves and react to the otherness. I mean, the outside objects, with reference to the outside objects. See, sometimes then some people you could see that they always have a defensive state of mind. Their thoughts, they think, should be protected and should not be influenced by the others. To those people you look at, and these people, their brain doesn't allow them to apply the rationalistic part of the brain. The rationalistic, they don't allow the right hemisphere of the brain. The right hemisphere always dodges the left hemisphere. The left hemisphere is attached to the fundamental beliefs and truths that we inherited through evolution. Evolutionarily, we used to have certain basic beliefs and truths that we believe as truth. Sometimes it is not truth, but we still attach to it. And that is the left brain. But you have to use the right brain to dodge the left brain, whether those beliefs and the truths that you assumed so far is right or wrong. You have to use the right brain, the right hemisphere. Are we doing that? Those who use the right brain knows how to be in time. You have to be in time. Then, if this is the moment, this second I have to be now present in my moment. It is self-observing. Self-observing is nothing but that makes you to think rationally, that controls your feelings. Then you will have emotional intelligence. You will know how to make judgments. And the reasoning will be polished so that you make right judgment. Einstein would have done it. And Newton would have done it. Maybe we are still not able to do it. Otherwise, each and every one of us would have become a discoverer. So when you have the defensive mental state, the defense state of mind, and if you live in that world, you will never improve, you will never find the truth. You always go into that kind of what is called the traditional notion of your life and beliefs and feelings. And you would assume naturally it as the truth, whereas it may not be the truth. It may be truth, but it may not be the truth as well. So that's what Hegel says, that you have to look at the reality, the real, the truth in otherness. In that case, whatever the truth you may have to negate it. You may have assumed as truth, you may have to negate yourself, your own truth, so that you will know the truth, the real truth, which is universal, that lies in otherness. What I'm talking about is how the mind thinks and how the material mind, helps to think. So this is the way we are, we are configured. The humankind is configured, which is the gift as opposed to the other animals. So that means consciousness in the quantum physical world is considered as a wave function. Sir Roger Penrose says that the consciousness lies in the microtubulins, and there are trillions of microtubulins inside the brain, and you cannot see them as an individual conscious particle. Because it lies in one tubulin, you cannot say it is there, you can observe it and capture it and process it. Because the trillions of microtubulins there in your neurons, and when you process this information and when you are self-aware and you are conscious, all these neurons forms the network. All these microtubulins conveys messages. The neurons charges with electrical and chemical process. And by that way, it behaves like a wave function, the same way like the quantum world behaves like. The quantum world behaves like a wave function. It's not a particle. So far, the classical physics of laws considered every matter as a particle. Every matter as a particle. Whereas the new physics, the modern physics, the quantum physics says it is not a particle. It is simultaneously a wave. That means if you try to measure, if you capture one particle, the wave collapses. That means you cannot capture anything. You cannot, there is uncertainty in this quantum physical world. That is the reality. So that means consciousness is the reduction and the collapse of this wave function that happens within the brain. That is what Sir Roger Penrose says. So that means how this consciousness internally observes the outside world and through a human experience, and how this consciousness is leading you to think and find the truth matters more. The point I'm trying to make is that just because it is a wave function and all neurons are connected, all subatomic particles are networked, naturally, you cannot say that your brain and my brain and your thought and my thought and everywhere, all these consciousness are same. So in that way that you have to go ahead, and find out the truth, and that lies in your human function and your human activity and the way by which you experience it. And you create awareness. The awareness creates understanding. The understanding creates intellectuality. Intelligence. Intelligence is the product of understanding. Without understanding, there is no intelligence. Sometimes people say that he is very good in mathematics. Somebody, a woman called Sakuntala Devi or somebody, she can just instantly work like mathematics, like a computer. She can calculate and compute any numericals. Is it intelligence? It is not intelligence. The intelligence is nothing but understanding. It lies in the understanding. Understanding emanates from the perception of your human experience. And the perception has to be modeled through a thought process. And that thought process will give us a wonderful result. That is the truth. That is nothing but the knowledge is about. This is what Immanuel Kant said. Immanuel Kant came out with the two theses, transcendental aesthetics and transcendental logic. In the aesthetics, he says that how sensibility, I mean our experience, how our experience are coordinated using perception so that you see the real world as it is. And in the logic, transcendental logic, you transcend what is transcendental means? You transcend your experience. You transcend your experience and you don't take your experience as it is, even though without experience you cannot think. So you take your experience, your human experience. The touching is a human experience. Seeing a color is a human experience. Interfacing with any object, physical world is an experience. But don't take as it is. You transcend it. You bypass it. Not bypass it. You transcend it. Go through it. Penetrate it. In depth. At the bottommost level, you find the truth. So that means conception is the result of the transcendental logic. The conception is the knowledge. And that consumption you have to do and coordinate the perception so that in a meaningful way through the proper thought process, so that you find the conception that is your understanding. But understanding is the ultimate, the factor that enables you to find the truth. So that means that this ultimate truth should be processed properly. Otherwise, you live in your own blind world. You might be thinking that you are somehow, going through a process of thought process as somebody feels, as somebody goes through, and you will find out your own ways of, thought process and find out the truth. You believe that it is truth. Sometimes it may, or sometimes it may not. So this is the problem that we face. So that means the thought process using a proper conscious state of mind leads to the truth. And that lies in the otherness. And without human experience, you cannot think so. And the consciousness is in the form of a wave function. And it is all the subatomic particles are connected in the neurons and in everyone's neurons, and all are combined together. But you have to find out how you can think yourself and come out of it with the truth. So with this, I would like to touch upon the society now. So we have seen the mind, how the mind thinks, and what are the materials in the mind which enables us to think. And the next is the physical world where we live. I told you that the social validation of our perceptions, of our views, our viewpoints, gives us the neurological inductions or inducements, and that will create dopamine neurotransmissions that will enable us to be happy, that will empower us. This is one point that we must keep in mind. The defensive state of the mind will degrade, will not allow us to think. It will stop or impede the rationalistic thought process of our brain. That is the defensive mind. But when your thought process is, when your thoughts are validated or appreciated by the external world, which is called social validation, then you get a dopamine neurotransmission that makes you empower. Though empowerment not lies just only as a human function or activity, but it also happens at the neural level activity. That is what the point I would like to make. That means both neurologically, physiologically, and physically, because of the outside world, our brains are, and our empowerment and our self-esteem are decided. This is the point. But you take the society now. We are living in a society. This society is hierarchically divided as caste, upper caste, lower caste, and there are so much dogmas there, and a lot of thought process respectively in each layer you will find. And there are a lot of philosophies inculcated in the way in which we evolved as a humankind in this part of the world. And there are a lot of good things and bad things as well. But as a result, that whether we are allowed to know the truth or not in the given social system we live in, because the social validity I told you gives us empowerment neurologically, physiologically. If your ideas are truth, and if that truth is declined by the society, and you are not empowered, and physiologically your brain is not empowered, you feel low esteem, and your brain again will use to it, and it will not think ahead. So physiologically your brain is destabilized because of your social validity. There are majority of the people in this country whose ideas and human experience were neglected in the past. And thus their human experience were not considered basically as knowledge. And those who are in the upper strata of the society and their human experience were considered as philosophies, considered as science. considered as a sacred, concepts that drives our day-to-day life. So that means the hierarchical social segments that we have in this country, in the name of caste system or religious and a lot of social divisions, we have a very diverse divisions. Diversity improves education, knowledge, and improves the truth also, but that is a different issue, provided the society is democratic. If the society is not democratic and socially divided, hierarchically suppressed and oppressed, and that community will not be able to reach the truth. That is the point I'm trying to make. Because those who are having a social status have the social authority, and their viewpoints will have to be accepted as laws of life, as laws of science, whether you like it or not. This has been the truth. I don't want to just go into deep because the audience are from different walks of life. I don't want to hurt anyone. But you just yourself interfere that how the majority of the human beings are inculcated with the philosophies which discriminate them. If any philosophy of life discriminates anyone, that is not the truth. That discrimination in terms of society or social or economic discriminations, whatever it is. So that means that social divisions, when it is undemocratic, I'm not against the social divisions. If all these social groups are set on equal platform with all democratic norms, there is no problem. But if these social divisions are undemocratic and hierarchically placed one above the other, and accordingly the social status, social authority, economic authority, and political authority are vested respectively on the social hierarchy, then the viewpoints of those who are at the top of the social order will have the ability to penetrate the society, the whole society, with its own philosophy as truth, and that will last longer. It is very difficult to counter this. Even if you use your right brain to counter it within yourself, you cannot do that because you will be helpless. You will feel helpless. And again, the state has another problem. The state, I mean the nation, a country. The state thinks that it has to control both the individual human being, the society, with its own notion. The state says, according to Gentile, before that, Hegel also stated that a nation is nothing but a unity of the consciousness of the society that lives in. The unity, the universal, the unity of the collective consciousness of the whole walks of life in the given nation is what nation is about. So Gentile took this philosophy and put it as an education policy under Mussolini. And they created a fascist education system. And they said that this is nation, and this nation has this consciousness. We define this nation as a consciousness. And that consciousness is called Roman pride in Italy, Romanito, Roman race, and Roman pride. The same thing, his counterpart, the contemporary leader, Hitler, he created Nazism using the same philosophy, the nationhood. He defined the nation with a unified consciousness, and that consciousness is called, he defined that consciousness as German pride, German race. German race is the superior race. It should rule the world. German pride and the traditions and philosophies of German should be the philosophy of the world. And he wanted to conquer, to inculcate those consciousness for the world, for the whole world. So you see how the nation has a state of consciousness. And that consciousness, if it is truly collected, if it is truly unified from the collective reasoning and collective consciousness of the people, then you can say it is right. But somebody sits there as a president and prime minister, and they come out with and define themselves with their own, stakeholders. The stakeholders are mostly for the nation. Who are they? Those who have the social authority, those who have the economic authority, and those who are dominating the liberal market forces these days. Those who are driving the market forces, and those who are dominating the society, and those who are dominating the economy. They always sit with, collude with the rulers. And these people, these are all the stakeholders, define what is the national consciousness. And that consciousness they inculcate on the people. And they force them to follow. So that means you lose your individuality. An individual human being in that country loses his individuality. He cannot think. He cannot use his microtubulins. He cannot use his empathetic neurons and things to reflect and see in the otherness and think and reflect. He cannot do so. The human potential is completely lost. Somebody will think, who are in the power will think, who are in the social authority and the highest state of the society will think, and all others have to follow and accept it. And this is what the nationalism, and the state has a major stake in it. I mean the country. So that means, on one hand, the society is influencing the consciousness, and those who are in the upper state of the society will think, and they inculcate and they enforce their own thought process and penetrate down to the society and makes the society to think and accept what they think. And similarly, the state will join the highest state of the society. They collude with them, they join with them, and they also define what the consciousness of the society, the consciousness of the state. Eventually, the individual member of the society will have to follow it. So the state and society, which are largely undemocratic in such countries like India, where the consciousness is lost, the truth is lost. In this context, I'm coming to the point of education, my friends. What education should do? What is education? What do we mean by education in the first place? Education, I told you, it is nothing but it is making the immature to mature and giving an option, opportunity, a platform, an ambience for them to learn and find the truth. It is a process of pervading the reality. It is not that somebody sits in Delhi and write the curriculum, write the textbook, and then tell all 130 crore people to just read it and follow it. It is not so. It is not education. Education is a social function. It is based on the human experience. I told you I started my talk with the human experience. Without human experience, you cannot create your own awareness. So the human experience is translated into the knowledge through the process of reasoning, and with the help of the material brain and the mental brain, and you are going to find the truth. And the truth is not just exclusively lies in your head. It is in the otherness. Then only you see the universal validity. That universal validity is the truth. That is the knowledge. That is what education should do. Whether you do civil engineering or mechanical engineering, physics, science, or these are all just domains or the invention of our society. Are there anything that can divide physics and chemistry? Which born first then? Can you define? Basically, if you take atom, the classical mechanic talks about the bondage of atoms that create molecules. And it creates molecules due to what? Then the chemical process involved. So the bondage first, the collisions, the fusion and fission. And these are all the physical activities that creates the chemical activity. How can you separate then physics and chemistry separate? How can you? When these atoms are the building blocks of you and me, all the materials, the physical world, and all biological world, how can you say that biology is different from physics then? How can you say biology is different from chemistry then? Biology is part of atom, isn't it? It is the building blocks of the biological physical system that you and me have is based on the atom, the building up of atoms. And it is again the same chemical and physical reactions created the biological body like us. That means without atom, there is no biology. So without physics, there is no biology. And without physics, chemistry, biology, where is engineering then? These are all our own creations. In the first place, we have to just eliminate this border. There is no domain exclusively as physics, chemistry, engineering. All are one and the same. That means education has to be borderless. Knowledge is already borderless. Because of that, education is borderless. So now, coming back to the point that we have our enemies, our society, which is highly discriminative, which is undemocratic, and the state always try to consolidate the society's different social groups and enslave the majority of the social groups with the help of the socially, specially cultivated social group, and with the help of the economic forces, with the help of the market forces, and they try to inculcate their consciousness as knowledge, and we all have to follow. This is what education should resist. If education has to resist now, honestly, I tell you, my friends, you have to completely disregard the educational process that we follow in current times. The curriculum and the process of making the curriculum that you do now all have to be evaded. Just completely ignored. This is a complete nonsense. In the name of education, what we do here in this part of the world, not only in this part of the world, but majority of the part of the world, even in the progressive worlds I'm talking about, in the United States or UK or any parts of the world who claim they are progressive, the current forms of education system should be completely demolished, ignored, eliminated. And we have to find out our own ways and mechanisms to, create a curriculum process and implement the curriculum process using a kind of a pedagogy, and that pedagogy will lead my students, my learners, my children to find the truth. And truth is the knowledge again. You might be asking a question that how undemocratic society is related to knowledge finding of things. What is the relativity? John Dewey says a society has to be democratic for it to have a kind of a living together, sharing together. The sharing together promotes togetherness and see the truth in otherness. You find the point. The social validity also comes in line. When a society is democratic, you can see the true, you can execute the true process of reasoning to find out your own consciousness without any dilutions or diversions. And you will be able to find out the truth. The truth is the universal appeal, which always have universal validity. Then only it is called pure knowledge. It is truth. And that truth you will be able to identify and execute and see in the otherness and refer to the otherness and find the truth. Then only it is truth means then your society should be democratic. In a given society, if in an undemocratic society, if the social group A discriminates social group B, and if social group B comes out with the truth and social group A would reject it, they are in the defensive state. And because the social group B, its ideas are rejected, and this social group B is not empowered, and it faces discrimination. This is what I call it as inclusive education about. When social group B from its own experience, all groups have good forms of experience. All have the potential to create and come out with own truths based on their own experience. I'm not declining that A has no truth and B has truth, but all have the potential. But education should enable them and make it inclusive by cultivating the human experience of all groups, regardless of the caste, creed, and high caste or low caste, and uppers and lowers, and all those discriminations. Regardless of these discriminations, education should be able to cultivate all the experiences and transform those experiences into human knowledge. And that is the truth. Unless the society is democratic, education cannot do its intended job. Unless. That means, given the undemocratic society, our society is undemocratic, what education should do? The curriculum should be able to go ahead and find out the truth. And curriculum should be blindfolded. A curriculum should be blindfolded. It cannot go in favor of group A or group B. Neither it go ahead with state or society, nor with the market force or economic forces. That means curriculum must be blindfolded, and the curriculum should be able to be inclusive in respect of cultivating the human experience from all walks of life without any segregations and discriminations. Then only you can call it as a curriculum, a right curriculum that will allow the students to see the truth. I mean the knowledge. You please tell me whether we have that kind of a curriculum in this country or not. Do we have that? The human diversity that we have is a great potential that any country in the world doesn't have. That diversity means more knowledge. More diversity means more knowledge. More knowledge means more, propagations of knowledge, permutations and combinations of knowledge. And this knowledge are going to find out more and more truth. That means India should be a powerful country in inventing, discovering the knowledge. In the recent times, in 1,500 years, India is not doing enough in the knowledge productivity because of the social divisions and discriminative divisions we have and undemocratic society we have. And more than that, the state is trying to, enslave the societies, enslave the people of this country with its own notion. So these are all the different contradicting, conflicting situations where education has to do its true job. That means what I'm trying to do is, on one hand, the consciousness is there, the conscious agents, like the human experience that we have, and accordingly the actions we take, and the actions are reflecting the affecting upon the world, I mean the objects, and the objects are affecting the human experience. It is a triangulated between human experience, actions, and the objects. So these are all triangulated forms of evolution of in the knowledge. So that means the consciousness and the conscious agents which are creating the consciousness have to be properly utilized and done in educational process. Otherwise, the students will be made to just simply follow what others think, and they may not reflect. So that means a level heading is required now, at least in the educational process, where we can cultivate the human experience from all walks of life and translate those experiences into knowledge. And those knowledge should be transparently, critically, handled in the learning process. And as an outcome of the learning process, the students and the learners and the society will be able to see the truth, and the society prosperously go ahead, and the nation will also find benefits because of more and more discoveries and truths and inventions will happen. This is one thing. The other thing is, and you have heard about the artificial intelligence, deep learning, and quantum physics. The quantum mechanics is making a huge jump in the way we have been evolving. There is an exponential rapid growth going to happen in the near future, not just more than 10 years. In the next 10 years, we are going to, each and every one of us is going to face in our day-to-day life. I mean, the impact of quantum mechanics and quantum life. As I told you before, the particles now in quantum mechanics are not alone. They are like a wave. They are part of wave, neither the particle nor wave. It's a dual property. And these particles there, as atom and subatomic particles lying in this wave, you can measure them, you can tweak them, you can use them for the benefit of the humankind. That is happening in the most effective way, in the most exponential way. It is happening now. In the next 10 years, we are all going to see those things in our real time. There is something called quantum computing. There are 4 quantum computers in the world as of now. 3 private players have each quantum computer, and the Chinese government has a quantum computer. Google has it, Alibaba has it, and another one, and Chinese government. There are 4 quantum computers. What do you mean by quantum computing? See, when we are using the classical physics, we have been using the particle system, not the dual function like a wave function. We consider the particles as particle, not like a wave. And using that, we had silicons, chips. And using those chips, we process the information and data. And now in quantum, we can use n number of particles. Using the wave function, all particles are connected. In quantum physics, something called superimpositions. That means the same electron lies in different places. In given 2 places, you can find the same electron lying in 2 different places at same time. So that means using this duality and superimposition, you can make these 2 electrons entangled to each other, connected to each other. By doing something there in one electron, you can make changes in another electron. With that, using that capacity and incorporating into a computing system, you can make quantum computing so that trillions of operations can be done in a fraction of a second, more than the computers now, the supercomputers are doing now. So our quantum computers are going to process the information and data exponentially beyond the imagination that the humankind ever had. So with this, we can resolve a lot of problems. And we can even find out any particle which is considered as a god so far. It is very easy. So the quantum physics leading towards that kind of a life that we are going to be realizing the effect in our day-to-day operations, and using artificial intelligence and the deep learning and machine learning systems with quantum mechanics. Those who are going to have the technology gain are going to influence our consciousness. That is the point I'm trying to make. So this is called disruptive technologies. And these disruptive technologies can be utilized to change my consciousness, to influence my consciousness. If somebody else is going to, so far in the name of upper caste, in the name of social authority, somebody else was disempowering me. Somebody else was changing my consciousness, influencing my consciousness physically. But now the electrons are going to influence me to change my consciousness. And by that way, I'm going to be influenced by the market, influenced by the state, influenced by the rulers, influenced by those who have the social authority. So that means my consciousness, another factor which is going to affect my consciousness and prevent me from identifying the truth myself is going to be the technology again. Even though these technologies are going to be good in many ways for us, we have to be very much careful how we can prevent the technology to influence our consciousness. In this process, what education should do? Do we have answers for that? The government of India has created national education policy. There is nothing, one word about this. About the whole 1 hour I was talking about. In this dimension, you will never ever find any solution in this country. That means we have to reinvent the whole educational process, not the process, but first the philosophy. When technology is there to influence our day-to-day affairs, to influence my brain and my consciousness, how are we going to prevent it? And how my education process is going to enable me to learn myself, to find the truth, to self-aware and become self-consciousness. That is the purpose of education. All these other concepts, philosophies and laws of science, these are all physical in nature. Anyone can learn. But making the human brain, the human being to think and act and to train the brain, train the mindset to think through the formats of the faculties of mind. And that is what education should do. If we do that, education really will be able to achieve its intended purpose. The intended purpose is identifying the truth, learning the truth, finding the truth, pervading the reality. Every human being will know how to think and be conscious on its own, on his or her own, and we will have the best possible potential human capacity, human capital. And this is what education should do. So by this way, what I'm trying to conclude is that I don't want to tell, already it is getting 1 hour, and maybe we can have some more interactions where I can answer in detail more. But now I just would like to just conclude with some remarks so that we can have some interactions. Maybe in the next, some other opportunities, we can expand what I said now. So I said that education is a social function. And we don't have to worry about all these subatomic particles of human and universal quantum physics and string theory and all those modern physics. It is there as a fact. It is nothing. It is not going to affect us unless we interfere into it and disrupt them. And people are trying to disrupt them using the quantum physics. They are going to disrupt the physics and try to conquer us, conquer majority of the people by the minority people who have the ability to conquer. And so far, physically, we have conquered, we have oppressed and suppressed the people, and economically, educationally, socially, politically. But now we have to find out education as a tool, how we can prevent all those suppressions and oppressions and enable the humankind to think and find the truth so that knowledge propagation will be at optimal conditions and we will be able to, create a wonderful human capital in this part of the world. I think that I'm closing this. I'm coming to the closure, sir. I know that we are concluding. So with this, the curriculum should be able to be democratic and no external forces should influence the curriculum and the suitable pedagogy should be involved. And this pedagogy should enable the self-consciousness of the individuals and help them identify the truth. And this collective process, I call it as society-driven education, because education is always a social function. It is something a scientific process. And it as a social function, and it has to be society-driven. It cannot be market-driven. It cannot be some social groups driven, and it cannot be economic driven. It cannot be a state driven. It has to be a society driven. Education should be brought back to the society, and education should be able to, deliver its intended objects, and all stakeholders, including you and me and policymakers and the market forces, the business forces and economic forces, political forces, all should collectively come together and define and reinvent education process so that we create the best possible human capital in this part of the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. It's been a very thought-provoking session and a lecture that you have provided today. You've basically taken us into the laws of science, humankind, education, how the thought process translates into perception, to understanding, and finally to intelligence. You have also touched upon a lot on the quantum world, and basically the main takeaway is the knowledge lies in otherness, and ultimately to come up with a society-driven education. A lot of thought-provoking, activities that you have mentioned today. We are going to open up the mics directly for the people to ask questions specifically related to your speech today. We would like to invite participants to share their ideas and also ask you relevant questions. I give out the mic to Mr. Vishwanath.
My question is very simple. Today, everything is internet learning. A person can log into anywhere in the world and learn anything he needs. Where is the question of education is in this role? I mean, who is an educator? If I want to learn anything in the world, I can just. It has been democratized. The internet has democratized education. So why you need educationists who have to tell curriculum, who has to force people to learn only this and that? Why don't you let people choose what they want to learn? Thank you.
That is a great question. Actually, you have the answer, sir. In your question, you have already the answer. That is what I intended to say. Education doesn't have to be, streamlined through the process of curriculum. And that's why I said that the curriculum is borderless and it has to be society driven. And when it comes to curriculum prescribed by the government or the government agencies like education departments, then it becomes a cause of concern and it is narrowed down. It may suit some people, it may not suit some other people. So in this way, that is why I said that when you go deep down in and translate the society driven education philosophy, you will know that the information is there. Coming back to the first part of your question, the internet, everything is there. Say, the internet has information. It doesn't have consciousness. So information alone cannot enable one to be educated by reviewing it. Information is nothing but a data. But intuition enables a person to process the data and to convert into knowledge. So that means in this process, the data is a part of the object. So that means unless a person experiences with the object, that person will not optimally connect this information or data available in the internet to convert into knowledge. So that means the human experience, experience has two forms of experience. The passive experience is qualia, like seeing the color and identifying it, and touching and feeling it, and seeing it. These are all qualia, these characteristics. And the second thing is the intuitional, the reasoning and other things. So that means these sensory, perceptions and non-sensory perceptions should be linked to the information there in the internet so that you will be able to make a good judgment. That judgment is called reasoning and you will know the truth. That's why internet alone cannot enable the society to be knowledgeable or to make more. Say, for instance, just to give an example, some people said the world is a flat before Galileo. Galileo found it is globe. So why people were seeing this world as flat? Because they saw it and it looked flat. To far distance, it looked flat. But you have to go beyond the flatness to find it is really round, globe, not flat. But if you look at the other way around, you see that when you have no eyes, that one sensory organ is gone. And do you have the world? You don't have the world. See, when a box is there and it is green color, and somebody sees it as box first, and then it is a green color. If I don't have eyes, only by touching only I will know that there is a box. If I don't touch and if I don't see the box and its color, then the box doesn't exist in my consciousness. So similarly, the information is there in the internet, online, and either you see it or not see it. That is a chance for you. But because you see it, that doesn't mean that you are going to perceive it and reason it and find out the knowledge. That means education must have a kind of an activity. I always use, I can expand it, what sort of activity it is. And there must be a curriculum. Otherwise, the border, the framework may not be there. Curriculum is nothing but it's a framework for formal framework for enabling the students and teachers to go through a process. Otherwise, it is borderless means then, and it is endless to learn on certain subjects. So that is why they have a curriculum. But what I say is that the curriculum should be borderless. The curriculum should have a framework that allow the people to be borderless within that framework, so that people will be confined to learn and acquire this certain knowledge within the prescribed time. So collectively, as a conclusion, internet alone is not enough.
Wish, does it answer your question?
No, I feel the role today, I mean, what I was trying to actually tell, since knowledge, raw knowledge is available on the internet, just like when books came into being, it's not the realm of a few. The educationists should now create consciousness to the people, like higher thinking, like empathy, global citizenship, respecting others. Those are the higher values that the education is, not knowledge, because knowledge is now available in the internet. That was what I was trying to say. They should they not give importance to those kind of issues than transmitting knowledge. That's what.
Yeah, that is partially correct. But so internet is an additional features we have to utilize, because our human experience is reported everywhere in the form of books, in forms of talks, and in the form of information in the internet. So internet is nothing but it is just like a book. It is a bigger book now. It is all our experiences are reported there. Now we have a wider exposure to those information that lies in the internet. That is an advantage for us. With that, we can improve it. But basically, the consciousness and finding the truth lies in your own brain, and enable the brain to think and process the information. And beyond the information, you should find the truth. So sometimes we just
the teachers, instead of just passing on knowledge, which is what they do now, they should now raise the consciousness and awareness of the students, or help them seek the truth, which must be the real role of the teacher.
That is the real role.
Than disseminating knowledge as it is done. Class notes everything, you don't need it anymore. You can cut and paste yourself whatever you want. This is what I.
You are correct. You are absolutely correct. You said who a teacher is to be, and a teacher has to, be a facilitator of the learning process and enable the learners to be reflective of the information that they receive, reflect with their own insights. And when they reflect, before they reflect it, upon receiving this information or the knowledge disseminated to him, and he is going to just reason it out and reflect with his own insights. And then only the process of learning completes. So if a teacher does that, whatever he does, let him do, but he has to do it, then he gets the real knowledge.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Sitaram has a question. Good and thought-provoking inputs, but literacy levels have to go up in general in our country to have social upliftment. How do institutions like yours can help in this?
Literacy level should go up to increase
To have a social upliftment.
social upliftment. Okay. Say the literacy is defined in such a way that those who can read and write and speak, those who cannot read and write. So this is the definition that distinguishes the literate people as opposed to the illiterate people. So what we are talking about is literacy is not enough for the upliftment of the humankind. Say for instance, in Tamil Nadu, I think we are reaching more than 80% of the people are literate. In Kerala, more than 90% of the people are literate. Does it mean that the people of Tamil Nadu and Kerala are knowledgeable people? If you ask this question, my answer would be yes or no. Yes means yes, few percent of people, because of the literacy, coincidentally, they increase their knowledge also. That is a different thing. But majority of the people not. Because as I told you in my speech, the knowledge is the fundamental process of the activity of the knowledge emanates from understanding. Understanding is created by awareness. And without understanding, there is no intelligence. So that means we have to equip the humankind towards the intelligence and through understanding and by creating awareness. Through this cycle of awareness, understanding, and intelligence, literacy plays a little role. Even without being illiterate, a person can think. So that means more than focusing on literacy and making them literate, of course, that is important. I don't say it is not necessary. It is a basic quality of a human being to be literate, to read and write, if that is the definition of literacy. And beyond that, we have to make the people to think and understand. That is enough. So that means unless you have a social ecosystem where the exchanges of ideas happen freely between different walks of life, between different social groups, and that enlightenment and understanding cannot happen because you are monopolistic. Being groomed in one watertight compartment, the fish doesn't know what the sea is about. The ecosystem of sea, the fish doesn't know if it lives in the well. So each of the social groups in India lives in a well without an intellectual discourse, an intellectual intercourse between different walks of life, between different social groups. That prevents us. So that means more diversity when a human being is exposed. With those diversity, the understanding is going to improve, and the government should come out with some kind of educational system so that the kids are groomed from day one, so that when they become adult, they will be used to that. Can we change the existing adult? I think it is difficult through the government. The existing adult can be changed only in the social reforms. So that means the society should evolve as a unified, a conscious state of force. And for that, the society should be democratic, and society should do that role. And the government should come out with relevant policies in education and relevant social justice related policies, so that combined together, a whole lot of society can be created as an enlightened society. And that kind of ecosystem is what India needs. Simply literacy cannot, but we have to promote literacy as well.
Yes, Dr. Jawahar, I am Sitaram, 75 Mechanical. I want to ask this question. I understand fully the literacy levels have to improve that, but that is the basics of any nation to have a bit of knowledge, because then only people can interact, understand what's happening, be aware of things around what is happening. Now, the real problem in our country is most of the people you have seen, we are talking of 80%, Kerala is 100% literacy, Tamil Nadu, as you said, is around 80% and all. But still, we are finding a lot of poor people who are not knowing what's happening around them. They are being misguided. They are being, we are talking of only people like you and me who have come up with the society, who are aware of so many things, like you said, quantum computing, supercomputers, everything. But what about the common man? We have got majority of common man who do not know what's happening. Secondly, the education, as you said, university education has to be meritocracy. That's my idea, my view. Because then only, and plus the people should be, mental thinking should be such that they need to improve the society. That's also not, it's not individually going up, to the highest level, but along with them, they should carry at least a group of people around them. These are the things which, how an institution like yours or educated people like you who are in the academic field can do it. That's what was my thought.
Actually, in your first part, you yourself said that when people are educated, literate more in Tamil Nadu and Kerala, still why they lost their path, or they are still poor and still they are considered as disadvantaged. Why? The reason is literacy. That's why I said that literacy has little to do with human development, even though it is a fundamental quality of human society. But you answered the second part, that is truth. That the society, has to reclaim itself. That is why I said that education is a social function as opposed to government function. It is not regulated by the government. It is regulated organically by the society itself. And that is the way we have to transform the education. So that is why the problem of the definition of education is getting a degree, getting a knowledge in civil engineering or relevant discipline, and go for work. And that has been, the educational process has been reduced to that level.
Absolutely.
That is the problem of this. That is the problem. We don't know how to think. That social dispositions we don't know. Both in the family and at work, we don't know how to dispose of the solutions. This is the problem.
No one knows.
The dispositions, the socio-professional dispositions, that needs more knowledge than what we learn from the schools and colleges. So that means that educational process is not exclusively the domain of the educational institutions, but it is majoritarily a part of the social function. So society has to play a major role in it, and society should reform itself to make a good education.
Thank you very much. When I keep coming to Mysore, I'll meet you one of the times. I am Mysore.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yes, Professor Rekha has posted a question. Would you like to unmute and talk, Professor Rekha?
Hello.
Please go ahead.
Dr. Rekha, please.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
You explained the need of otherness to find truth, thereby getting knowledge through this quantum physics. So, as a teacher, the university is providing curriculum and all to us. So, changes should be done from that itself, no? The change from such educational policies.
Yes, you are 100% right. The problem is, madam, you are right. You are confined to work within the framework prescribed by the government and your university. So your university should have the wisdom to create that educational ecosystem and relevant ingredients and frameworks for you to do that. If your university doesn't have, you cannot do that. And above your university, somebody is ruling this fate and ruling the country. And education has become a matter of whims and fancy of the rulers in this country. And whatever they want to inculcate, the first area they take is education, because only through education they can blindfold or brainwash or influence the society. And that is what they do. So it is not just only in your university. Beyond that, it should start from the top down. Say, for instance, in United States, in America, there is no education policy at all. The highest knowledge producing, the knowledge productive country in the world is United States now. You take it in terms of inventions, discoveries, patents. If these are all the forms of knowledge, US is the first. But there is no, and most of these things are handled in the educational institutions. You take Stanford, Harvard, Pennsylvania, and you take California, Berkeley. If you, MIT, if you deduct or eliminate these 4 or 5 institutions, there is no America. So that means these are all the pillars of the evolution of transformation of the country and society there, where that country doesn't have any policy, no regulations. And they just cascaded down the power, the authority of education at the level of the society. At district level, education is handled in schools. There is no state level regulatory bodies also there in United States. That doesn't mean I argue for American education. There are a lot of flaws and mistakes there. It is market driven. In that way, American education is wrong. It is a neoliberal market driven education. In that way, it is wrong. But there is no policy, I'm saying. Whereas in this country, we have a policy top down. The country is centralizing the curriculum, centralizing the exam, centralizing everything. There is a NEET, SIT, SET. There are hundreds and thousands of assessment bodies. They think that knowledge lies in the assessment, in the examinations. So there are examination regimes we have in this country. With that, we think that we are going to test the knowledge. That is the fallacy, and it is a wrong conception, and we all have to fight for it. So that means the policy top down should change. Only then professors and teachers should. That is why you all should, professors like Dr. Rekha, should come out and take the responsibility. And if the policy is right, you accept it. If the policy is wrong, you reject it and voice for it and debate it and help the country to come out with a good policy so that you and me can do our professor job and really do our educational job.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nesam, for answering the queries. Is there any other question anybody would like to ask?
Nesam, this is Murli. Hello.
Yes, Mr. Murali.
Nesam, in the beginning, I think you made some very interesting point, actually. I think you said about the human brain, actually, right? Human brain, normal human brain contains 100 billion neurons, right? And those are very much critical for the thought process, cognitive abilities, or thinking orientation. I think you also raised some important point. Everyone has same number of neurons, and how one person's intelligence is different. And you give example of Albert Einstein and all. So my question is, I mean, how is it we can correlate, actually? It's like if, like, let's say for some students we are finding, right, they have a learning disability or with a low IQ. So can we say that I mean, their brain neurons are not effective or less? I'm just asking, how is it we can make it, actually? You know, I know it is totally digressing from this topic, because we see some people low IQ, right? Some people low IQ, some people there is a when understanding problems is there, right? Some people takes a lot of time to grasp things actually. Some may not think in the proper linear direction. So there are a lot of variations actually. So from there, the saying, how is the brain structured actually? So is that the neurons are not being this thing, or also all chaotically arranged, or insufficiency in the number of neurons, or is a neurological disorder at the brain level? Or I know it is a total little digressing from the topic, but just curious to know actually.
Now your question is very, you have come to a point, how these neural networks and our brain physiology is linked to the knowledge, productivity, and the thought process. I think that is what I can infer from your question.
Yes.
Yeah, your question is very, very valid. The thing is, when all have 100 billion neurons, and are they infectious or defective in thinking? It is not. The thing is, say for instance, I go to an extreme extent to tell this example so that I think we all will understand. The thing is, I told you the tubulons, the microtubulons in the neurons. That is the subatomic particle inside the neuron. Neuron itself is an atomic particle. And inside the neuron, there is something called microtubules. And inside one neuron, there are trillions of microtubulins, right? And if these microtubulins are organized in an array, in a proper array physiologically, so that it conveys, it triggers, it processes the information. Whereas if these tubulons are in a disarray, sometimes aged people like 70 years, 80 years, sometimes they get memory loss. And some people get dementia and Alzheimer's disease. And that Alzheimer's disease, if you talk, the basic reason of the Alzheimer's disease is the array, in a physiological array, these tubulons are arranged naturally, and this deforms. If the array is deformed, then you get Alzheimer's disease. The Alzheimer's disease is you lose everything, all memories you lose, and you cannot think also properly because the tubulons have lost the proper array and it is deformed. So that means in that case only you can say that people cannot think, cannot act, and they are defective. Their tubulons are defective. Because of that, they got Alzheimer's disease. And now the scientists are trying to find out some clinical therapies to rearray the tubulons so that the Alzheimer's disease can be properly treated. Even the quantum mechanics, they are trying to implement it in the future. In another 20 years, they might come out with some therapies. Why I told this example is that only in deformities, in defective cells, you get that kind of problem. But normally, there is one girl in China, she lived without cerebrum. So can a person live without cerebrum, with all consciousness? And she was going through some kind of a little cognitive problem. And when she was in 30s, after 30 years old, and she was tested and diagnosed inside, and the doctors found there is no cerebrum there. And it was cavity, nothing. But still she can think. So this is the beauty of the brain. You see, the beauty of the brain is that the left brain only we use, the right brain majority we don't use it because it is a creative part. And even if you are in a deformed state, you don't have to, sometimes you don't have to worry about it for a normal person to think and act. So it is, to answer your question, it is nothing to do with the neurological deformities and defectness and things. But as you said, people still have qualities like more IQ and more grasping capacities. It is not because of the better neurons they have. It is because of the electrical and the chemical charges that they that they fast produce and in processing the information. Because the neuron, that's why I told you in the beginning that when you open up your eyes and see the things immediately in a fraction of second, millisecond, all your neurons start firing electric charges. And then based on that, you are going to think and process and do the things. Maybe in their process, that firing process is more fast so that they can, the networks, the neural networks are simultaneously created fast and eventually they observe. But even the lowest thinking people who is low in observing and grasping the things can also, produce a good knowledge and find out, come out with a truth more than Einstein if he or she wants. If he trains his brain, or if he uses his brain and using the thought process properly. That is what education should do. Education should go and train the mind to think. Training the mind to think. So that is what I call pedagogies. There are a lot of pedagogical interventions we may have to do at an earlier time, from the age of 3, 5, from the kids onwards, so that you train the minds of the kids to think. So they used to it and they start fire more electric and chemical charges based on the perceptions that they have, and they can fast think and come out with ideas. Did I answer you, sir?
Yeah, thanks, Dixon. I think that clarifies actually. Thanks a lot.
Oh, thanks. Thank you.
Yeah, we have Haripriya who has raised her hand. Kindly unmute. Yeah.
Thank you so much. It was a wonderful session. My question is regarding how to teach creativity and entrepreneurship within the students, maybe at school level. If you see, we don't need to memorize things anymore, but we still need teachers to guide our students towards learning the best way to problem solve. The question is, how do you measure that?
Say, I don't know, I'm going to answer exactly the last tail piece of your question, but I will try to answer it if I can. And if you are not satisfied, you ask me more, madam. The thing is, I think partly your question has an answer. You said problem solving. You said that how to make students to creatively think. Partly pedagogy is problem solving. Say a problem posing method. It was, even recently Paulo Freire, a kind of the doyens in education pedagogy, and they have invented some kind of, problem posing methods. And initially I told you from Hegel 300 years ago, 200 years ago, and the negation of negate the negation, that means negate your own thought, and then you go out and find out more beyond your own reasoning, so that you find the truth. So there are a lot of interventions you can do at school. You asked me exclusively school levels. So you can do different methods of pedagogical interventions to make the students creative. That's why biologically talking, I told you in the beginning that the left brain goes with the accumulated beliefs and faith and the knowledge that you have been exposed to evolutionarily. That is left brain. But in the right brain, say when you go with more and more experience, what happens? Sometimes those experience will dodge, will try to reach your left brain to get your acceptance. And your left brain most probably will reject it, because you are already comfortable with whatever the belief and the knowledge you have with your left brain. And with that, you will reject it. If you accept it, that means you are going to use the right brain and use the right brain to dodge the left brain to accept it. So that means you are going to, if you because of the experience and perceptions, new experience and perceptions, if you are going to change your existing belief that you have, that means you are going to use your right brain and dodge the left brain and enable the left brain to accept it, so that you will improve. That means you are open to the new ideas and the new activities. That creates creativity. that will enable you to go for innovations and inventions. Say, how to do that in classrooms? One, you said it is through problem solving. The other thing is critical pedagogy. The critical pedagogy is like you have to question the status quo of the knowledge that you receive. Say, for instance, if I have a gravitational force as identified, as discovered by Einstein, and that knowledge, if I am going to experiment it further and see that there are certain flaws in it and come out with additional knowledge, that means it is a creative thinking. That means it is a critical thinking. So that means critically, if you enable your students to dodge, to question the fundamental existence of the knowledge that they receive in the learning process, then they will be able to creatively think. Whether they come out with insightful knowledge or not, the mind is practiced to think continually, creatively, so that one day on certain problems, they will come out with inventions and some major radical breakthrough solutions, and those solutions will become an input for them to become entrepreneur, to produce product, to produce new patent, and to come out with altogether a new system so that they are known for it. Say, that is why in the learning style, you have to be not static, and you have to be open, and so that the students, the argumentative style, interactive models, and questioning models, puzzle models, and objective reality, analyzing the objective reality, and all those forms of thought process, if you practice in the learning process, students will be able to be creative. That can happen in first standard also at a reasonable level, and in PhD as well. There is no problem with that. But the last part of the question, how to measure it? See, the problem is measuring anything naturally in the world is diluted now. In classical physics, I would start from there. In classical physics, you can measure anything. As a particle, you can measure the mass and its velocity. But in the modern physics, in quantum physics, if you try to measure anything, it dissolves because it is a wave particle. It is in wave. Say you put a stone in the water and the waves spread. And can you measure those waves? You cannot. See, it is similar. It is like a wave. And if you try to measure one particular mass and velocity of a particle in that wave collapses. That means it becomes zero. That is the new physics. That is the truth as well. So that means, to me, measurement always is subjective. It is indicative. It is not final. Please don't intend to measure. That is why I always oppose the current rote forms of examination system. The examination system that we follow now is completely rote. They think that by measuring the knowledge.
Exactly where I'm coming there. So we have the standardization, right? For the exam. So we think no kid is left out. So it's not at the university level we start this change. At the school level, we should start changing the system, right?
Yeah. See, examination, you see, should be outcome oriented. It should not be content oriented. And if knowledge is the outcome, your examination should foster only knowledge. Examination is a form of learning assessment. That's what I would say. I don't use the word examination. If you take a learning assessment, you are assessing the learning to ensure that the student has acquired that knowledge or understood it. So that understanding you are going to test and you are going to assess. So you do whatever you want to. And if you go with the examination, the standard examination that we have now, it is not. The same happens in NEET examination. It is either of the 4 or 5 answers. Is it testing the knowledge? It is not. So how would you how would you evaluate a student possessing high knowledge because of higher scores in NEET examination? It is ridiculous. It is absolutely against the learning assessment.
Exactly.
So that is why I say, if you say it is outcome oriented, you devise it. You devise it because outcomes are very much different. You cannot use the same pattern of examination for assessing all learning outcomes. The learning outcomes are different in nature. So assessing the learning outcomes should be so much different. Say, I can quote examples, several examples how to do it. Maybe this is not too much a technical session to go into that extent. So the concept is not towards testing something else. And this is what happening in this country. And we are, in the name of examination, we are misusing all those, the educational process in the name of examination.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Dr. Nesam.
Thank you, madam.
Sendil, 1991 batch. Please go ahead, Sendil.
Yeah, so good morning. Myself Senthil Kumar. I have a query. The beginning of the session, it was stated that for the last 1,000 years, India has not contributed much to the world. If it is so, in today's scenario, most of the CEOs in USA and the scientists in NASA are mostly they are of Indian origin. They have done the basic education from India. So, if Indian education system is not good, and how these people have become successful CEOs or scientists in USA, in a foreign country, or the number of CEOs, the scientists are not adequate because of the prevailing education system in India. That is one. And the second is, when we were studying in a college during 1990s, we were all taught to get a good marks and join a good job, and we were never taught that we should become an entrepreneur. So today's entrepreneur, whomsoever we are seeing, it is because their own skills and surroundings and all these things, self-interest they have done. What I suggest, in the current education system, we need to incorporate teaching the necessity of entrepreneurship skills from the school level itself, so that instead of students searching for job after completing education, everyone should become an entrepreneur. This is my thought process I am sharing with you.
Thank you, sir. See, the first part of your question, what I said is that knowledge productivity. In that only I said we are not progressive in the last 1,000 years or 1,500 years, I would say, in the knowledge productivity. Say, before 2,000 years, when the many parts of the world lived in caves, in India, we were highly leading a civilized life. And even today, when it comes to mind, brain, thinking, knowledge, consciousness, Buddha is the forefather. And he was the ever first scientist who invented what consciousness is about. Even in today's metaphysical or quantum physical science, his statement is still valid. It is proven. So likewise, there are great forefathers we had 2,000 years ago. In the last 4,000 to 2,000 years ago, there are a lot of ideas and principles and scientific theories we have contributed to the world. Say, with the same effect, in the last 1,000, 1,500 years, our knowledge productivity was not optimal. I did not say our people are inferior. Our people are there, 80% there in NASA and a lot of CEOs there in United States, but those scientists are not there in India. That is the question I'm talking about. See, why they are doing well 80% there in NASA, and why CEOs are performing well there. And I myself was a professor in United States. The first time when I went to England for higher studies, I studied in Annamala University, first degree. And a teacher, I don't want to name him, he just comes with a big book, irrigation engineering. He just open it, he reads that book, and I sit in the first bench. He reads it and we have to write it. And that book, we also have it. And if I don't write it, and he used to give me imposition. One time I slept on the desk, and he gave me 10 times imposition to rewrite it. But when I went to first time England, I really was a so successful scholar, and I was thinking myself, my esteem was very high. And as I told you, my dopamine level, neurotransmissions were very much working optimally maybe. And I felt myself esteemed. And I was a ranking scholar there. And such a person was an average scholar in India. Why? See, this is the problem. The ecosystem, the educational, intellectual ecosystem in this country is impeding our best performing people who can be the greatest CEOs and great scientists in the United States or somewhere, and they are undermined here. And the system is not approving them. The approval of their knowledge or their outcome is very much discouraged. And that is one thing. Say, if you talk about all these scientific discoveries, inventions, and philosophies in the last 1,000 years, most of it borns from the Western countries. In that aspect only, I told you. But otherwise, we are competent potential human capital who are on par with international standards, and given an opportunity, we will be able to do that. I'm not undermining the Indians, but I'm recognizing that we are not producing enough the knowledge that we produced 2,000 years ago. And the second part is the entrepreneurship, your question. That entrepreneurship should start from the budding stage, you said. Yes, I appreciate that idea. See, when entrepreneurship is encouraged, what is the ecosystem that encourages entrepreneurship? And the entrepreneurship is an activity, but entrepreneurialism is an attitude, is a culture. So that means that entrepreneurship attitude evolves when you have more diverse thought process. See, in England, a committee commissioned by the Parliament just a few years ago came out with an idea, a suggestion, a strategy that every research in United Kingdom should be comprised of all different diverse group of people. A black people, a Indian origin people, a white people, European. So when different kinds of thought process with different expertise, different social backgrounds are involved, with a diverse pool of thought process involved, they come out with innovations, more innovations. The idea will be more creative, more innovative. So more inventions leads to entrepreneurship, because more inventions leads to more products, more designs, and then you can commercialize it. You can go for entrepreneurship. So that means here, not only this educational system should promote that, the basic attitude of the pedagogies of the education system and the pedagogies that we use in grooming the kids towards entrepreneurship should involve diverse social backgrounds, amalgamation of different thought processes, and cultivation of all human experience from all walks of life. Say, for instance, when KFC was able to come out with the patentable food, Kentucky Fried Chicken, and it can conquer the whole world, why not in Tamil Nadu that we have our own staple foods, and in Kerala people have, and here in Karnataka there is something called the Ragi Mudde. Ragi Mudde in Karnataka, the Karnataka people might know. Why this kind of foods which are very health and very much nutritious in style, not becoming a global food then? Because we are not able to commercialize it. We are not recognizing this as a knowledge. There is a knowledge somebody is practicing in day-to-day life, that human experience, and education should cultivate it and then incorporate it as a knowledge, or in a raw form, it can cultivate and translate it into knowledge, and that becomes innovation, and that innovation gives a livelihood and economic opportunities, activities. So the economic activities will be increased when education is more and more going to cultivate the human experience in real time and translate those experience into knowledge. And only then entrepreneurship, innovation happens, and economic activities grow and entrepreneurship happens. So this is the ecosystem, this is the supply chain of the economic activities. So when economic activities are inbuilt and embedded in the society, ignoring this, if you take education as a separate activity away from this whole supply chain, how will you reflect the social demands and translate those demands into economic activity that becomes entrepreneurship? So these are all the major flaws in the things. So that is what we have to incorporate from day one in the curriculum, and using some pedagogies, you can improve entrepreneurship.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Nesam, we have been receiving a lot of feedback from our participants, and people are really happy. One such feedback has come from Mr. Gopi. Thank you, Dr. Jawahar Nesam, for the excellent sharing. There are two kinds of speeches, the flat and the fabulous. Yours was the later. And one more feedback from Mrs. Srinivasulu, a realistic person to explain in a very simple manner. Kudos to a good session. And we really thank you for your time, and you have been having a very uninterrupted time of not even having a sip of water during your speech. Such is the dedication and passion that you have been showing. And we thank you very much for your time today, for coming and sharing your knowledge. If you have a little more time, we will also introduce the members who are now present. I request Arivu Raja to kindly take up the task. Arivu?
Tarik, I have a question. Can I post?
Yeah, please, sir, go ahead.
Yeah, please.
Sir, I just want to know. See, I just want to have the difference between this IQ and the memory.
Your voice was interrupted. Say again, sir, please.
I just want to know, is there any difference between the IQ and the, quantum memory power? Those who are having a quantum memory power, will they have a highest IQ or not?
I think so. See, that is not yet estimated till now. As far as my knowledge is concerned, the quantum, the quantum means, you see, in the physical world in general, we call electron and quarks as the fundamental elements, as quantum, the quantum elements. When it comes to brain, we call the tubulence, the microtubulence, as quantum level of the brain. That is the smallest level, and that is where consciousness process. So that means, see, if say basically as a common man understanding, we can see that if our muscles and tissues and cells are so vibrant and strong, our metabolism is at optimal conditions, and we are doing well, and our energy is also high. So the same way, if our physiologically, if our microtubulons are very healthy and it is very strong, and our memory power and our thought process and the electric signals that it is going to fire is also going to be very much faster and things. So in that way, yes, it is connected to the quantum levels of the brain. The IQ is related to the quantum levels of the brain. But as of now, my understanding, my scientific knowledge is concerned, no one is able to measure it. That is the problem.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Arivu, can you go ahead?
Yes, sir.
Member
ரொம்ப presentation வந்து ரொம்ப wonderful sir, really amazing and very useful, informative.
Thank you.
கோர் கமிட்டி ஆரம்பிக்கலாமா சார், இல்ல அப்படியே ஜெனரலா?
எப்படி பண்ணுங்க அறிவு, எல்லாரையும் 1 by 1 பண்ணுங்க.
சரிங்க சார். சார் ஸ்ரீகுமார் சார். Introduce yourself sir. Sir, mute la இருக்கீங்க.
Yeah, okay. I'm Srikumar, 79 Chemical, and I'm at Coimbatore doing a business of L&T and it was a wonderful presentation by you, and it was really worth listening to you, and that's why I posted your question. And I have a supplementary question also. All the scientists, how do you call them? Is that quantum memory people or the memory, I mean IQ level big memory?
I heard that people like Einstein had high IQ levels, and that really helps them. Is an advantage. Having high IQ is an advantage only, but it is not the final for our end outcome. Okay. Even I heard that people who had memory loss have also been great philosophers and scientists in the world, that we have read in the history. Yeah. So that means, that is why I told in the beginning that these are all there in the brain like anyone else have, but the way we use the brain and train the brain to think and find the truth enables us to achieve more or think more.
Thank you.
That is the thing, sir.
Thank you, sir.